What's going on, ghouls and gals? I am back with another horror movie review. And as always, my full thoughts and mental health breakdown for this movie can be found on the Victims and Villains YouTube page and or victimsandvillains.net, both of which you guys find links for in the bio. Tonight we're going to be talking about The Invitation. It tells the story of Evie, a New York girl who goes across pond to rediscover a side of her family she didn't know, and ultimately ends up finding love, and finding that love to be a little bit problematic. Almost as problematic as this movie in terms of tone. I think this movie will satisfy people that like the genre of gothic romance. I think there's a lot to love for them here. But if you're a casual moviegoer, this is really going to turn you off. And if you are coming in this movie expecting a horror movie, you are going to be sadly disappointed. First 2/3 of this movie are trying to establish a gothic romance with slight elements of horror that are more possession style. Then the third act is full-on horror that is completely opposite from what we see. This movie is just a tonal nightmare. Performances are really solid though, and the production design is pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and give this one a 2 out of 5. Again, my full thoughts and mental health breakdown are on our website, victimsandvillains.net. What's going on, guys? Welcome to Victims and Villains. If you guys are new to our content, we create content right here, like what you're watching right now, simply to educate and engage individuals like yourselves on mental health awareness and suicide prevention through pop culture. My name's Capt Nostalgia. I'm a writer, podcaster, and the director of our film festival, Horrific Hope. If you guys would like more information on how to submit your films, our podcasts, more movie reviews like this, social media, how to support us financially, and most importantly, our mental health resource library. All of those are going to be found in the show notes below. But speaking of film festivals, typically this time of the year is where we cover one of our favorite festivals, and that is GenreBlast. Think of it, if it wasn't for GenreBlast, Horrific Hope might not even exist. But because of our busy schedule this time of year, unfortunately we were not able to be in person for GenreBlast. So what's going to happen is we have a select bit of the titles from this year's selection. We're going to be talking about them throughout the months of September and October, so that way you guys are having lots of movies to be on the lookout for. And please support GenreBlast. If you guys would like more information about GenreBlast, links are going to be in the show notes below. And I can't talk highly enough about this festival. It is legitimately one of my favorite times of the year. I've never not gone and had an awesome time. And this is the only film festival that I've ever actually walked out of because the festival content was too extreme for me. So if you like extreme horror, then this festival is for you. It's called GenreBlast Film Festival. It's held every Labor Day weekend at the Alamo Drafthouse in Winchester, Virginia, and also that's where our festival is. So make sure that you guys check them out. And let's jump into today's selection. So this meta horror comedy tells the story of Beth Cooper, a local goth girl who is depressed and at her prestigious Catholic school, there comes on her new regiment, and I kid you not, the movie is about a build up to an all-you-can-eat contest that will result in the winner getting a gun. I'm going to specify why the eating contest leads to them getting a gun. This movie is a weird blend because it's incredibly offensive. It openly talks about mental health, suicide, school shootings, a slew of pop culture references, but also on the same side, it's also a really intelligent satire that is kind of taking these subjects that are really taboo and really easily offensible and bringing them into a cohesive story that is not only funny, but it's also entertaining, and also at the same time just one of the most original movies I've seen this year. gonna lie, I debated talking on how to talk about this movie because of how it handles the subject of suicide, and being a suicide prevention channel and nonprofit, I really debated on whether or not even kind of talking about this movie. Movies, when they are talking about depression or mental health, they're doing it in a way that is really just overly serious, and like you can't, and just kind of like really one note with the characters. Almost it begs the question, like, how dare we kind of make depressed characters three-dimensional? And that's what I've really found refreshing about Eating Miss Campbell, is that this movie has an actual fleshed out person, and does a really good job at fleshing out and kind of explaining the depression and the suicidal tendencies as well. And I would even go as far as to say that this movie demonstrates that suicide is not the answer. I'm not gonna tell you how this movie ends, but this movie ends kind of in an interesting way. On the flip side of that, this movie also addresses largely school shootings, school massacres, and just kind of the unhinged nature that is associated with this. This movie does address mental health in a really interesting way. I would probably say that I'm neither for the way that this movie addresses mental health, but I'm also not against it. This movie, particularly how it addresses these, is by weaving that into the film's commentary and narrative, which I thought was a really fascinating decision to make. And this movie addresses the fact that mental health has a lot to do with the more drastic and violent decisions we as a species makes. And it's not to say that basically that you can't pinpoint to one particular thing, whether you're talking about violent video games or horror movies or music. Like those things might have an influence, but they're not the direct result of violent behavior. Yeah, I thought that was such a fascinating way to kind of address the more recent issues that we've had, at least here in America. It's worth noting that this movie is not American. This movie comes from the United Kingdom and is how the United Kingdom actually sees America. And that's such a fascinating thing for me to do, but also it's also worth noting that two of the central characters are also from America, and it's written into the script that way. Let me make no exceptions. This movie is going to offend a lot of people. This movie, again, I really was kind of offended. There are different parts of this movie. There were different parts where I cringed and I was like, I'm uncomfortable. But I think overall, the things that this movie is trying to say and how they say it is a really smart but also brutally honest way. With that, the acting in this movie is actually really works for it. It's kind of like this line between not quite serious but not quite camp, and it kind of meets somewhere in the middle. I really liked the meta angle of it, like the fact that this movie opens up on Lyndsey Craine, who is incredible in this movie, specifically just kind of addressing how her life is a horror movie, both literally and figuratively. I think it sets up the movie in a really smart way. The way that she kind of has this running fourth wall break throughout the rest of the movie, I think it's really genius. And also at the same time, not only does it present a satisfying conclusion to the commentary that presents in the end, but it also makes the ending of this movie more effective because of the choice to pursue a meta experience. And just from a side note, this movie was really cool to watch because some Horrific Hope alumni cast members from our film festival have also premiered in this movie. Shout out to James, Morton, Charlie, and Dani Thompson, who starred in our closing selection last year, Pandemonium. Annabelle Rich, who not only took home Best Acting in a Feature last year for our film festival, but also kicked off our film festival with her movie Acting. Them in here, I think, do a really great job. Like I said, there's not really a bad performance in here. Like, if a performance is cringy, there's a purpose for that, and that's what I think that this movie does really well, is that there's a purpose for literally everything that is happening in the walls of this movie. The gags in this movie are worthy to satisfy any horror fan, whether you are a long-time horror hound like myself, or you're just kind of starting to dip into the genre, this movie makes really interesting decisions when it comes to its kills and also how it weaves them into the narrative. Like I said, everything has purpose, and I really enjoy this movie. Liam Regan wrote and directed this movie. This movie is distributed by Troma, and Lloyd Kaufman himself makes a cameo in this movie and also produces it. If that doesn't tell you that there's going to be some level of offense here, then here's me telling you to you. Let's go ahead and run this through our Rorschach rating scale. I'm going to go ahead and give Eating Miss Campbell a 4 out of 5. I think this movie, what it does really well is that it's equally as smart as it is offensive, but sometimes you need to be offended in order to grow as an individual, and this movie challenges that in spades. It's smart, it's funny, it has great gags, great acting, it's paced really well, and this movie, overall, for as odd as it sounds, it does have some charm and some fun to it. As of right now, Eating Miss Campbell is making its way throughout the festival circuit, so there is no definite release date. Once we find out something, we'll probably retweet it or share it, but make sure that you guys follow us here on wherever. Make sure you guys click the links in the descriptions to follow us on our social media. But I know this movie has talked a lot about it, but let's talk about mental health. If you guys are new to our content, Mental Health Moment is where we take a theme of mental health and we talk about it for just a few moments out of the film which we're reviewing and hope to deconstruct the stigma surrounding mental health. I'm not gonna lie, this movie is really hard to talk about when it talks about mental health because it addresses mental health in such a borderline offensive way. Protagonist, Miss Beth Connor, who is a depressed individual that wears black all the time, really going after that goth stereotype, I guess, really demonstrates that she articulates that she's just not wanting to live anymore, and that kind of becomes her mission throughout the course of this movie. From someone that has been in mental health for over 10 years now, from someone that has created well over 500 podcasts, from someone that has suffered and still suffers with depression, anxiety, and has even contemplated suicide, I just want to counteract that and say no matter how bad this life gets, please stay with us. Every circumstance is different, and I know that there are a million reasons why you think you should not be here anymore, but I want to give you 1,000,001 reasons why you should stay here. You waking up today was no accident. You being here present, watching a movie that you may or may not have never heard of, is the universe or God, depending on what you believe, telling you that you have value and that you have worth. And no matter how hard this life gets, to have people that are going to be in your corner, that are going to have resources like our mental health resource library in the show notes below, that are going to say, stay with us. Find something to make it through today, and then find something to make it through tomorrow, and the next day, and the next day, so on and so forth. Because your life matters. Regardless of what anyone else thinks, your life matters. Every breath that you take matters. Every step that you take matters. Please stay with us. And as always, if you or someone you know is watching this and you're struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, links for our mental health resource library are going to be in the show notes below. And make sure that you guys hit the subscribe button, and we'll be back with more GenreBlast content.